failure in Nosh's opinion because his hypothesis didn't hold true. But what had happened was he had the idea that cannabis is different, and that if you consume different types of cannabis, you should have a different brainwave response. So he went into the market and gathered 4 distinct different varieties by virtue of their marking on the label, and he used them in the study, and they had no differentiation in brainwave from the different types of cannabis. And so Abrams sees this, contacts this guy, and says, I think you use the same cannabis. And he goes, what do you mean? He goes, there's 4 distinct categories that we know is real. And he said, I don't think you use them. And he said, let me provide you cannabis that fits in using our scientific analysis of how we can take a look at ratios and where weights are, and it lets us really understand how to look at a category, and I'll provide it to you, and then let's see what happens. And then they had 4 radically different brainwave responses. And it was important because the idea that cannabis is, it's all the same, that there's no difference between where it comes from and what it does, it's just that the users just smoke and consume. We've heard that shit forever. And the problem is that scientists, a lot of them, most of them, don't have any experience in cannabis, so they don't really understand how to look at it from a cultivation perspective, cultural perspective, consumption perspective. They understand the science of it, but the science doesn't fill in. That's why I'm about data for sales, but be aware that it measures a controlled environment. And so if I change something in that environment, I'll change that data dramatically. So it's not biblical. It isn't like this shit's bedrock where if you look at it, it's what it is. It's interpretation, and it's the ability to be able to utilize this idea that cannabis breaks up simply into 4 divisions. These 4 divisions not only help you understand how things smell, but we can make some generalizations on how they make you feel. And what it does, it allows us to be able to take a look at our population around our retail centers and figure out, in the population around us, what's the demographics? Who are the people that surround me? And that lets me know where I should concentrate and emphasize my categories. So if I'm in a tech center, I have to categorize more floral. I have to drive floral levels higher because what we see, and what's the proof? Blue Dream is #1 seller, Seattle, San Francisco, and Portland. So in areas on the West Coast where it's high tech, what sells the most? In a place where there's many choices? Those type of things. And so what it does, it lets you understand that if you're in a high-tech area, you need to make sure you're having a menu item that's covering that. And if most of your people are coming in that are high-tech, you need to make sure that you have multiple menu items that cover it so they have diversity of choices. If you're in an area where... Oh!
You gotta explain why the Blue Dream's moving in those tech areas.
Oh, totally. I'm going to give it to you, though. I'm going to give it to you. What you have is you have the things that have odor and scent are a combination of the environment that shaped it. So the plant produces a metabolite package only in response to stress. So if the plant's not having any stress, it has a lower metabolite package. And it's about attracting pollinators. It's about repelling pathogenic pressure. So the plant, because it can't run away, it has to create metabolites to protect itself. We like metabolites. That's what we're about. And so we steer the natural direction of a plant by selection, but the environment sets the base. And so what you can say is that things that are from 0 to 20 on the equator, I don't care where I am on the equator, they're really pretty similar in profile because they all have to deal with high humidity. And so what you see is these similarities in scent, but subtle changes in what the people wanted depending on the hardship of their life. But all of it uplifting, cerebral, energetic, clear. So when I want to stimulate the group that does high tech, what they need clear minds, but they also need a hybrid that brings in some form of pain relief because they're banging on a keyboard for 12 hours a day. And so you can see these cerebral hybrids selling extremely well in a certain area. Now, what if I'm poor? What do I want? I want fuel. Because why? Because I get the most THC per package per dollar. And it doesn't mean I necessarily get higher, but I have the ability to stay high longer. I have more in my system. And because my money is low, I want a better value. Where does gas also move? To people who are really accomplished smokers. Because what we need is we need a profile that absolutely grabs us, and fruit typically doesn't. And so when fuel gets tired, people bring other varieties into it to give you a little spice. But ultimately, without the gas, real smokers really aren't grabbing it. So if we went into fruits, fruits are always a light palate, light in the mouth, delicate, interesting. Fruits were never that popular, really. What made fruit popular? Fruit became popular as a consumptive because people that smoke vape have fruit flavoring. And so just as a side note, what are the 3 flavors that are most addictive? Lemon, orange, and grapefruit. And so when you're talking about what drives the response to smoke more, it's those things. But it didn't work in cannabis because the cannabinoids that were connected to it weren't strong enough to make you want to come back to it. So you loved the mouth, but you really weren't getting high. And so the young kids come in with vaping and they love the fruit, but also concentrates comes into existence, and now we're able to start taking fruit and getting it strong enough for an experience, which then drives the desire for people to bring fruit back into flower. And so fruit's an oddity in a sense where it's extremely popular now, but really it was the smallest of the categories. And so earth, stuff like Bubba, Pure Kush, Master Kush, Hindu Kush, any of those are broadleaf, but they're almost always typically earthy, chocolatey, leathery, and they're relaxing. They're of a narcotic, and they don't have an aggressive high. They have a more balanced high, and on a cannabinoid level, they typically have more CBD. So really, when you're taking a look at like Pakistani populations, Afghani populations, you see a higher level of CBD inherently because they need the balancing agent to help them feel good because it's a brutal fucking life living in the high deserts of Pakistan. And so people who want a relaxing type direction go typically into earth. People who want light, open flavor. So if we lived in an area that was suburbia and we had lots of new smokers, who do you think what would they buy? They would buy the things that they have most familiarity with, that have the least serious ramifications if they overconsume. So if you take people who are average consumers and you have them smoke fuel, regardless of the cannabinoid content, they're getting ripped. It's rare. There's outliers, but we would say the majority, the preponderance of time, this is what happens. So what this does for you is it allows you to say, okay, where are we at right now in the market in Canada? Where is the places that sell my product? What are the distributors focusing on? And it starts to allow you to make a really simple grouping. So instead of looking at 7,000 SKUs, I'm looking at clusters that break up into 4 big pieces. And in those 4 big pieces, I can determine in that cluster, what do they want? They want fruit, but what's hot? California, what's hot in fruit? Lemon. So 51% of the people coming into a store in California want something lemon. So what we know is that lemon's trending. And so maybe next year grape might trend. Year after that, it might be tangerine, right? So it's gonna be a fruit, but which one? And so what you have to do now is be able to understand, okay, they're going towards that. Does that mean you have to run and try to find that clone and oh my God, I gotta get that right thing? No, you find something that satisfies the desires in that arena. So if you want orange, I'm gonna give you orange. It doesn't have to be the cut that they have, it just has to be a good orange. And so when they go